Testing 1, 2, 1, 2. And they said I'm not funny. Some of you know me as the Jose Wilson. Jose Wilson, know me as a math teacher for students. This is not a test. Welcome, America, to the latest installment of a People's March. For the next 3 minutes, I ask you to defy protocol, disband the status quo, bust open these deformed gates. Unlock the teacher's lounge, unlock the teacher's lounge, unlock the teacher's lounge. I beg your pardon, but I am not your proctor. I march with the protesters and our hands are raised. A pledge for a new narrative. This is not a test. This is not a test, Mr. President. This is an assessment written against the idea that the dates and places of our history can be shrunk to the choice between B and C. And that is the purpose for this assembly, an extended response to a failed corporatist agenda, a reflection on the state of our most public of options, measured against the rubric of human rights. But this is not a test. This is not a test, Mr. Duncan. Take note. This is not us asking. This is not us begging. This is not us pleading. This is us fighting for all things equal. This is us uniting as a more perfect union. This is us reminding America of a promissory note unpaid. This is us writing our own documentation when politicians refuse our kids the opportunity. But we are all dreamers, and this is not a test. This is not a test, Mr. Bloomberg. I repeat, this is not a test, Mr. Bloomberg. This is the generation of children from the classrooms where teachers boldly stood and thought kids could learn. Educators stand firm, whether in cafeterias, mess halls, or prison halls. School is in session, and we submit our entire lives for the millions of students a year. So even when I stand in front of the class, I am always children first. This is not a test. This is not a test, Miss Reed. This is not a test, Miss Reed. This is an exam unmoved by mayoral cycles. And I'm a bubble you cannot erase. I'm a mouth you cannot tape. I'm a heat you cannot beat. I come in a swarm of thousands. So I am a bee you cannot eat. This is not a test. This is not a test, Mr. President. Given an answer sheet, these students shaded in LOVE over ABCD. A set of standards commonly set forth before, acing geography by means of peace instead of war, shaping the world henceforth. They will elevate our math to where the sum of the people is greater than the parts, becoming fluent in the languages of English, Spanish, and caring. America, please put your pencils down. This is not a test. 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 Deformers, you are dismissed.
Jose Luis Wilson is what Barnett Berry, the author of this chapter and this book, would call a teacherpreneur. He is a math educator for a middle school in the Washington Heights neighborhood of New York. He graduated with a bachelor's degree in computer science from Syracuse. He is also a committed writer, activist, web designer, and father. His first solo project, This Is Not a Test, a new narrative on race, class, and the future of education, was published by Haymarket Books in the spring of 2014. We're looking at his website where he blogs about many topics in education and mainly about transcending teaching's past into a new, better tomorrow. As Mr. Berry says in the first sentence of this chapter, the history of the teaching profession in America is stormy and convoluted, and often framed by the struggle to determine who teaches what and how, as well as under what conditions they do so and at what cost. Over 200 years ago, America's teachers were hired to transmit values and to some extent the basic skills of the day. For most of teaching's past, women would not only work for much cheaper wages but were also seen as more naturally inclined to teach children in a job that was thought not to require a great deal of intelligence. Teachers are often admired for service by parents, but just as often bear the brunt and disdain when public education is being criticized. And they are typically appreciated for serving children, but mocked for their assumed lack of intellectual ability and their perceived inability to compete in the large labor market. It seems that the younger the student, the less status his or her teachers hold. Even in other professions like medicine, pediatricians earn less than any number of specialists. In America, it seems taking care of the young has never generated much prestige for any occupational group. Transcending teaching's past will mean to move past the gender bias and prejudice that existed in the early years, where teachers were barred from being married, taught in exchange for room and board, and were later paid considerably less than their male counterparts. While we've come a long way since there, we can still see some irregularities when you look at the fact that 76% of our teachers now are female. The teaching profession has been examined for a while. Willard Waller's Sociology of Teaching and Dan Lordy's Civil Rights Era book, School Teaching, address issues on the systematic devaluing of teachers that are still present in American society. Both these scholars assert that teachers are trained and have historically been trained for conformity rather than creativity, and behind that conformity and from that conformity comes fear. They conclude that principals are afraid of central administrators, who are afraid of school boards, and that each of the three conspires to make it clear to teachers that except for students, it is teachers who are on the bottom rung of the organizational food chain. Lordy calls this a semi-profession, where standards of practice are defined by those outside of the classroom who know little of what it means to teach effectively in a real-world context. Left alone in their classrooms, teachers are not likely to play a major role in defining and improving the core features of their work. Arthur Wise, the chair of the Council for Teacher Quality's Board of Directors, sums up where we are in the teacher-leader movement as follows. I think the frustration of teachers, accomplished teachers, teacher leaders, and now teacherpreneurs is beginning to really show. They are busting to get out of the cage because they know they have the knowledge and skill to reform the field in ways to allow their expertise to extend to not just the 25 or 30 students in front of them, but to hundreds or even thousands more by virtue of their influence on other teachers. This has happened in other fields. Why has that not happened in our field? Why do we not have that level of confidence in teachers? We need a revolution. Meet Shannon Sidibaca, a 6-year-old Latina teacher with 38 years of award-winning experience in science. She lives in Nebraska, New Mexico, and Hawaii. After 3 decades of teaching in brick-and-mortar schools, Shannon teaches for the Iowa Learning Online with a teacherpreneurial reach that enhances her work with high school students.
I've been in education 30 plus years, been teaching over 30 years, in online learning over 5. there's been such an incredible change over the last 30 years, from no computers and a chalkboard and chalk dust in your sinus every day to smart boards and Wi-Fi and the internet. It's been a roller coaster ride because technology came on while I was teaching. The greatest impact or the greatest success I think I had was staying focused on what was important. The relationships again. If I focused on the technology, I'm focusing on the wrong thing. If I focused on the morphing world of curriculum that's changed about 30 or 40 times in 30 years, that would be the wrong thing. Focusing on the fact that every kid deserves to have one adult, at minimum, in every school that cares about how they do, so that student, none of my at-risk students ever succeeded because I built a better curriculum, I used more technology, I had a shinier cafeteria. None of them ever stayed because of that. They stayed because they had an adult teacher who was a leader to them, who said, I believe in you, and I'm going to care about you longer than you can care about you. Those relationships and focusing on that's been my greatest achievement, because every turn of the road allows you to forget that. For whatever reason, I had people that were helping me, and a lot of times kids, helping me focus and keep that in the forefront, that the relationship that I develop with kids is more important than any program.
Shannon is relentless about the quality of her work, and in grand teacherpreneurial fashion, she's always the first one to identify how she can improve on what others would think would be already a grand success. She's a pioneer in the Wild West of online learning, where she has mastered what few have: the development of a vibrant virtual community of learners. Shannon's truly is a classroom without walls, and it offers benefits in terms of time, transparency, and a strategic use of direct instruction. Shannon's online teaching is not about a quicker and less expensive way of readying students for standardized testing. It is serious learning, and students and teachers taking control over time, schooling's most critical commodity. Shannon is what Susan Cain would describe as a noiseless leader. She makes the case that introverts do not always go hand in glove with ideas about power and leadership, and perhaps this is why reformers routinely overlook teachers, who may be more introverted than not, as leaders outside their schools, districts, and states. Often it takes just one or two people to see the quiet power of introverts and spur them on to lead. Such was the case with Shannon. And what Shannon does, like Jose before, is take chances and stretch limits. Internet will not only make teachers more visible, but will also help them create more teacherpreneurs. And in doing so, teaching's past, dominated by stark lines of distinction between those who teach and those who lead, will finally become history. More teachers will lead, and more administrators will teach, and in doing so, will blur the lines of distinction between those who teach and those who lead.